President Trump recently tweeted that he will delay the upcoming November election. In tonight's Verify, our team finds out if the president actually has the power to delay an election. Here's our Evan Kozlov.
When it comes to politics, it's hard to know what's real and what's just political spin. That's why the Verify team is here, focused on just the facts.
My name is David Munson.
For months now, we've been getting questions like this.
Can President Trump delay the 2020 election due to the coronavirus?
It's something that President Trump just suggested in a tweet. Quote, delay the election until people can properly, securely, and safely vote. So let's verify. Can the president actually do this? To get the answer, we turn to our experts.
Someone gets sworn in on January 20th.
Gary Nordlinger from the George Washington University.
A really scary, dangerous idea.
And Paul Smith from Georgetown Law. They tell us the date is set by the Presidential Election Day Act, passed in 1845. Hypothetically, Congress could choose to change the date. But here's the thing. There's a hard deadline for when the president's term needs to be over. And it comes from the Constitution. The 20th Amendment says the president's term ends at noon on January 20th, no matter what.
So you can change all these dates. You cannot change the 20th of January.
So we can verify false. The president does not have the power to cancel the election on his own. Only Congress can do that. And this brings up a fascinating hypothetical. Who would be our president on January 20th, 2021 if Congress decided to delay federal elections? And we should note this is completely uncharted territory. Even our experts aren't completely sure. Smith, our constitutional lawyer, says we could look at the succession order. Without federal elections for president, vice president, and the Speaker of the House, it would fall to the Senate pro tem. Right now, that's Iowa Republican Senator Chuck Grassley. Meanwhile, our political expert, Nordlinger, isn't so sure, saying that states can have continuity plans of their own and can call for their own elections. The point is, this has never happened before.
The election was held in the Civil War. This is a scary time, but it's not that kind of scary time. We need to have the democracy maintained.
With your Verify, this is Evan Kozlov.